Hey everybody, Javier here once again bringing you another episode of Javier in the Air. Today's theme, writing and of course, beer. So, two things that are pretty near and dear to my heart. And so I thought I'd bring you something a little bit different today as far as the beer section goes. The first part, we have a fantastic writer named James Pavlovsky. You've heard me talk about him before, otherwise known as the two-door down neighbor. He wrote a book, a really good, interesting book about growing up in East Texas. And so I thought I would have him on to talk a little bit about it. He will talk a little bit about his inspiration for doing it, why he did it, what it took to write it, what it took to get it published. For those of you out there like myself who are interested in trying to get something written, how you go about doing it, and also a little bit about the book itself. And then we kind of digress and go off about growing up in the 60s and 70s and talk a little bit about, having to use your imagination more as a kid than a lot of the kids do nowadays because they don't have or they have technology available for them, so that makes it a little bit easier for them to dive into creative outputs that are by other people and not themselves. Not saying this is for all kids, but however, I'd like to hear if you're upset by what I just said or you don't believe in it, then shoot me a text because I know there are some kids out there that still go and do things and they go outside and they, use their imagination and they use the box rather than the device because they enjoy it. They get out there, they do things for fun. Now, on the other hand, are they doing this because they want to, or are they doing this because their parents are like, get out of the house? You've been in here for 90 to 120 days, and it's just time for you to get outside. Do something. I don't care, anything. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. If it isn't, I would like to know. If it is, I'd like to know as well what you do with your kids out there. Anyway, I digress from what I was talking about, which was writing and beer. So, first part is definitely, as always, something different. I decided to talk a little bit about writing today. So, I myself have written some short stories in the past. I continue to work on other stories that I haven't yet published. I do have a website of my own. It's www.havstories.com. Hav stories, one word, so JAV stories.com. So I have put out some of the writings that I've done over the years, way back when I was a young type individual. I didn't have a lot of money, and so I decided I was going to write stories and send them off to friends and family for Christmas. So in each combination, there was a poem and there was a story. So some of you may have remembered them, some of you may still have them. I know my uncle did, and my grandfather did, and I know my mom does, and I believe my dad does as well, have copies of them. I have copies of them all. A lot of them are on my website. And so they are kind of a running theme that had to do with apocalyptic future and an individual who may or may not be immortal, you don't know, that goes weaving throughout different villages and has adventures and so on and so forth. But enough about that, enough about me. So I'm going to have an interview. I had an interview this morning. I actually got it done same day as the podcast. I know I was a little bit lax on that. But it turned out to be a really good interview. So James has been my neighbor now for almost 6 years now. Him and his wife Zaida are, I consider, really good friends of mine. We hang out and play dominoes a couple times a week. We have kind of the same type background in both career and just growing up, so we reminisce a lot about that. We talk about playing dominoes and talk about music all the time. So that is something that I will definitely have them on when we talk about games and when we talk about beer, but especially when we talk about games, and especially when we have a follow-up to that great podcast that I had interviewing Chris McDowell about music. If you haven't seen the podcast with Chris on there, please do. I think it's one of the better ones that I had, especially because I love music as well. And so we really got into the music and the music scene in the 70s and 80s in San Antonio. And so it's really good. I might have multiple people on next time about music, talking about what their favorite music is and so on. Anyway, James and Zaida have been my neighbors for about 6 years now, like I said. And during that time, James wrote a book, and it was called The Last of the Con Kids. I actually have it here. I won't show it too much on here. Let me get the angle right. There it is. This is James, with a family photo there, and then this is the mart that was down the street from James, about a quarter mile, not really down the street, but about a quarter mile away from where they grew up, where he grew up, and he'll talk a little bit about that during the interview. So, without further ado, we're going to dive right into James's interview. So I'm going to send it over to Interview Hob, and he's going to talk with James about his book, The Last Cotton Kids. Take it away, Interview Hob.
Hey, thanks, Javier in the air, Hop. Hey, everybody, this is Interview Hop, and today we have writer James Pavlovsky, aka neighbor from two doors down, here to talk about a book that he wrote. Hey, James, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me on.
You bet, man. So the name of the book is The Last Cotton Kids. Here's a copy. Here's a look at it. I may have to image it later on. So you
Yeah.
see a picture there, and then what's this picture right here? The mart. Is that the mart in Mart?
No, that's actually Elk Store. So that was one of the little towns that we lived in. It was a population of maybe about 30 or 40 people.
Yeah.
And it was basically, back in the 50s and 60s, it had been opened up by a guy named Walter Duloc, and it was your basic little community grocery store slash feed store slash beer joint slash gas station slash ice house.
Wow.
So it served a very large community of rural people.
Uh-huh.
And of course, at that time, those kind of stores were really popular because, I mean, obviously there weren't the U-Totems and 7-Elevens and
Right.
Quick and Pack that were on every street corner. So uh, the mornings usually at those stores were very busy. A lot of farmers, ranchers, just people who had small businesses stopping by and just picking up the things that they needed
Right.
to get by. So the reason that picture is in there is because several of the stories in the book
Yeah.
are really about us living next to that store. We were about maybe a quarter of a mile away
Okay.
from there where we lived at, and so a lot of stuff happened around that store, and then there was a lot of people that we interacted with in
Mhm.
that community, and so it was sort of the centerpiece of that little community of Elk, Texas.
Wow, great. Yeah, before we get into it, because I had some questions about that, but before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about what made you decide to write the book, and then like how long did it take you to write for like people? I know a couple people that are interested in writing kind of like their memoirs as well, which is kind of a little bit like what this book is. So take me through that a little bit and tell me about your adventure in writing it.
Well, I mean, uh, there were just so many stories that me and my older brother David always sort of reminisced on, and you know, I really wanted to kind of share those with everybody, and then I also wanted to talk about a period of time, and this, by the way, this book takes place from around 1960 to around 1967 or
Okay.
68, kind of that time period in there. And so I sort of wanted to talk about a time when there was no green screen, that that kept kids indoors. It was a time where, and you remember a lot of this, is that back then, we stayed outside a lot.
Right.
There was nothing to do in the house except break stuff. And having two brothers, it was pretty easy to end up in trouble. And so one of the things I wanted to sort of try to capture is this period of time when, kids, when they needed something to do, they went outside and they used their imagination, or whatever sort of situation they ran into, to pass the time, because there was no there was no cartoon channels, there was no arcades or video games, there was nothing like that. And so I got several comments from some of the people who reviewed the book as I was writing it, and that was kind of one of the things that they found the most interesting, was that how different parenting was back then, when your kids weren't sitting in the back room on the couch in front of the TV,
Right.
or sitting with their little video game in front of them and playing video games. It was like, well, they're outside somewhere.
Right. And you were allowed to go and explore. And you got in trouble every now and then. What I was reading, actually, you got in trouble. You and Dave got in trouble a lot. But
yeah,
you were definitely out there exploring and imagining things. You talk about the airplane tree, and you talk about one which I found fascinating was, I guess you went by that store, was the bicycle race that you and Dave had. You were on your 26-inch bicycle Huffy, and he was on his 24, and how y'all were racing out down there, and talk about the old man that was sitting there, and his routine was to walk down there, drink a beer until 2, and then take a nap.
And taking that, that's it. And back then it was so, especially in a small town like that, and in a lot of small towns, I think even today,
Yeah.
it's like you can let your kids go outside, and you're going to know, even though you can't visibly see them, you're going to know who they're with, right? And pretty much what they're doing. And then all the other parents and the other people would be watching out for them. So even though my mom could not see us and she didn't know where we were at, she was a brief phone call away from finding out we got into trouble doing something somewhere else that we shouldn't have been doing, know? So there was a lot less risk of, getting kidnapped or whatever. I mean, it was just a lot simpler time.
Right. One of the things I liked also about the book was the names of your chapters. So you had like something that was like straightforward, and then you had like a little story for it. I'm going to just read some of these chapters names out so that people get what I'm talking about. Yeah. Well, the first one is Limestone County, BC, and then you have before Carl. So BC is before Carl. So I think that's just awesome. So Carl, by the way, for everyone, is James's younger brother, who's only like what, 4 or 5 years younger?
No, he's 6 years younger.
So 6 years younger. So okay.
6 years younger than me. Yeah.
And then my favorite one was great aunts and uncles, the big old barn, and the zombie boogeyman. That's just a great chapter name. Makes you want to go to it right away and be like, what the hell is James talking about on the zombie boogeyman? And it's a good read. So when you get to that chapter, you'll know what I'm talking about. But it's stuff like that makes it really good. That makes it seem to be really good, that you want to dive in, because it's not a true like autobiography style. It's almost like you have a story behind each of the chapters, which I found to be very interesting that way, because it keeps you entertained. And then, like I said, there was, interspersed with I got a spanking, and then Dave and I got a spanking, and then we got in trouble, and Mom got us, tore us a new one, and so it was just it was just good overall. So it's definitely a good book. So
Well, it was to answer your other question earlier about how did I come about putting it together and how was it writing a book? I mean, I learned a lot about having never written any sort of, I'd written short stories before when I was in high school for English and history, but I really had no idea how to go into this and where to start. And so kind of what I did, I had the stories in my head.
Okay.
But I had to sort of sit down at first and I kind of did an outline of, and that's kind of where some of the chapters came from, was I put together this outline and said, okay, these are kind of the stories that I best remember, because once I got into each chapter and started writing it, I found that, wow, there is, number one, it's really hard to remember what happened. And so the reality is, and history in a sense is like this, it's written, in that person's viewpoint.
Right.
Right. Yep. Because one of the things my older brother Dave told me was, as he read through this book, he was like, well, I don't remember stuff happening like that. I remember it happening like this, right? And I was like, well, if you want it to happen like that, then you go write a book.
You go write the book. Exactly.
and we'll get the other perspective.
Yeah. I found that even though I didn't grow up in East Texas and I didn't grow up in the 60s, but the 70s, that there was still a lot that you were talking about, like you said, like specifically like the bicycle race, which takes me back to remembering the bicycles that my sisters and my brother and I had. And then it's real nostalgic for people who are looking, especially in this time and age of all the craziness that's going on there. If you want a little nostalgic throwback to how things were, simpler because like you said, there's no screens. And so you had to find things to do. You and Dave and Carl had to find things to do. I had to find things to do, almost half a generation later, and do it because there was nothing to do. So your parents kick you out of the house on the weekends or during the summer because they don't have time for you running around inside the house. And you didn't have a big house, and I didn't have a big house growing up. So there's no room for, 3 kids, 4 kids to be running around. You can get the hell outside, go away. And,
well, I'm kind of curious. So you were in a big family. So in the summers, would your parents send you to stay with aunts and uncles or grandparents or anything like that?
They did send us to our grandparents for both sets for a while, on and off during the summers. And then we got to the point where my oldest sister was old enough that we could stay at home. But what that meant was that stay at home, AKA do all the chores, clean the house from top to bottom.
Yes.
Every day. And we're like, we just cleaned it yesterday. It's spick and span. We don't need to do anything else. No, it's summertime. There's nothing going on. You are cleaning the house from top to bottom. And so since there was 4 of us, we were able to break up the chores. But we got that down to a science. So you could do that in an hour and a half, and then you still had 9 hours before the parents came home. So we went out and we did stuff, or we did stuff inside the house, but without the parents there. So it made it a little bit easier. So yeah. That's what you did. There was 3 channels, 4 channels if you got PBS, and
that's right.
That was it. So that was it outside. So great. So I think I like the inspiration behind the book. And I've met your brother, so I can talk to them a little bit about the stories about the whoopings that y'all would get. And so tell me, is this book self-published? Is it published somewhere? Where can people get a hold of this book?
It was self-published, so I went through a company called Outskirts Press,
Okay.
and I looked at several different self-publishing companies,
Uh-huh.
and they all have various advantages and disadvantages. It kind of depends. I mean, nowadays you have so many options with what you can do with a book.
Sure.
You know, you can make an audio book out of it. You can make it available in soft copy only.
Mm-hmm.
You can, you know, depending on what sort of illustrations and stuff you have and pictures in the book can affect how you want it delivered. And then, of course, there's so many different media outlets, and I really originally I wanted to make it available through Amazon, and it was for a while.
Okay.
But I no longer have it available on Amazon.
Okay.
Now, if you go to the website Outskirts Press
Mm-hmm.
and you search for The Last Cotton Kids in their bookstore, it'll come up, and then you can order it directly from them. And the nice thing about that is it's a little bit cheaper. I think I'd have to go back and look. I want to say it's like $10 or $11,
Okay.
something like that. And it does say that it's black and white only, but that's because I don't have any pictures in it.
Right.
So that doesn't imply that the cover is black and white. So a lot of people have gotten confused about that.
Gotcha. Okay.
But getting back to one of your other questions about writing, haven't done any writing, or haven't not done any writing. That was one of the big challenges for me, was trying to get stuff out of my head and get it on paper.
Gotcha.
You know, and it's like, it's easy to sit down and just write a sentence and say, I went and did this. But to the casual reader, if you don't have some context around it about, you know, either what was going on in the environment at the time, or what you were thinking emotionally, or what other people were doing around you,
Gotcha.
It's kind of boring, right? And so as I sat down and started writing some of these chapters, I would have to sit there and think about all of these other things that was going on, so I could put some context on it.
Gotcha.
And so it ended up taking me, even though it's not a long book, I mean, it's 120 something pages.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a very short book, but it took me close to 2 years to finish it, because there would be times where I would just get stuck and on how I wanted to write something in a story, and I would just have to sort of step away from it. And I remember that was really back when I started walking a lot.
Okay.
And when I did that, it sort of helped me relax enough to where I could come up with some of these thoughts and ideas around some of the stuff that went into the book. So, you know, my suggestion for people, if you want to write something, you really need to put a lot of planning up front ahead of time before you start on it, and have a really good idea of what you want to say before you start doing it, because otherwise you just sort of get stuck, you know.
Right.
It becomes that much harder to put something together.
Excellent. No, that's great. That's great. That's going to be great for everyone, because I do have people that ask me from time to time about that, and they're not sure where to start. So I think that's going to help out a lot, James.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, James Pavlovsky, writer of The Last Cotton Kids. I know it's reversed, but you can see it there. Last Cotton Kids. In the regular podcast, I'm gonna go ahead and supply the link. So for anybody that's interested in giving this a read, which I highly recommend, click on there and get a copy. If you ever come visit me at home, when you can always we can see if we can get the author to sign the book for you. So check it out, The Last Cotton Kids. Thanks, James. We'll talk about Moon on some other podcast, because I think we need to bring in Zaida on that one too. So we'll definitely.
Yes, definitely.
All right, buddy. I'll talk to you later. Going back to podcast hop. Take it away.
Uh,
Hey, hey! Thanks, interview, Hob. I'm back, everyone. So, just went to get something for the second portion of my podcast. Let me adjust my glasses here. So, great interview from James and, of course, Javier. Fantastic. Love that guy. Great interview from James. A lot of nostalgia there. Like I mentioned before, it's a great book. We had fun in talking about it and talking about the old days and different days and that sort of thing. I highly recommend getting you the book. You can go to the, as James said, the publisher's website and get it, which is Outskirts Press. I will be posting the uh, search results that I have for it, so that you can just see that and use that for your to get there. You can get a hard copy like I have, and if you ever have a chance and the opportunity to come visit me, we can certainly reach out to James, two doors down guy, and see if he'll sign the book for you. I think it's a really good book, and I think you'll really enjoy it. It's not a very long one, so if you have a short attention span, I think you can get it done. I highly recommend that you get your kids to maybe read a chapter or two. So, especially if you're someone like myself who grew up in the times before heavy duty cable, the times before those type of networks, the times before personal devices, phones that weren't attached, or phones that were only attached to the wall. So it may give them a little perspective and difference between what they see now and what was back then. I'm not saying they're going to necessarily love it or enjoy it. They may roll their eyes at you, but it may be fun to just talk about those days if you were there during those days, and or they could ask their grandparents about it, just to give them a little bit more connection to what was back then. So if you can imagine, what we're going through right now, quarantine wise, what do you do if you have no personal devices? And to be honest, there are some places and people out there to this day that either can't afford personal devices, so they don't have one, they don't have good Wi-Fi, they don't have internet, or they don't even have internet to speak of, and so they are out there doing these types of things. They and day in day out. So it's not like they have a choice. Do I go and I play Candy Crush, or I play Minecraft for a couple of hours today, or do I go outside? Their only option is to go outside, because sitting inside and doing nothing, I'm sure will drive their parents, grandparents, whoever, crazy. So and if you have a chance, get out there and enjoy this time that you have right now with your children. You may never get it again, especially if one or both parents are not working right now. So get out and enjoy it, because those are the times that they're going to remember the most about you. I certainly did and do for memories for when I was a kid growing up. Anyway, let's not get wax too nostalgic now. Now we're going to talk about beer. So I had a request from someone who wants to remain anonymous for now. They don't. They're not too. They're a little bit introverted, a little bit shy about wanting to be on the podcast. They watch the podcast, so thank you very much. You know who you are. So rather than do what I normally do for the Boutique, I'm going to show one of the older reviews. But what I'm also going to do is, for the first time ever, I'm actually going to do a live tasting right now. So I have my glass that I've been using on all my reviews, or for at least half of the reviews. I have another glass, but I started using this one as well. I like using it. It's actually it was given to me the last time I went out to, or one of the times I went out to the Boutique for the Last Stand Brewing Company. It's a really nice glass, and we can get into glassware one day. That helps out with beer drinking. So today's beer is Twisted Tea Hard Iced Tea Original. It's not really a beer per se. It's more along the lines of cider. These hard alcohols have been coming out. You have your hard root beer, you have your hard strawberry cream, or orange cream, you have your hard root beers, you have your hard this and that and the other. So What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try this one. Actually, I found it at the store when I was shopping the other day, so it made it easy for the person who told me to go try it. He hadn't seen me. He hadn't seen me do an actual tasting um, of a hard iced tea, and I don't think, from what I can recall, I haven't done one for a hard iced tea. So this is actually brought to us by Twisted Tea Brewing Company out of Cincinnati, Ohio. So for those Ohioans that are part of my family and friends, this is for you guys out there. And this person is actually out in Ohio. So, all right. So, interesting can. You see, it's got some screenshots of people that are enjoying the Twisted Tea. I'm gonna give it a shot and see. I don't know where the ABV is on this. I don't seem to see it anywhere. Relatively easy for my blindness that I have for small writing. Yeah, I don't see it. So I'm gonna. Oh, there it is. 5% ABV. So 5% ABV. Let's give it a shot. Here it is. It looks just like tea. Let's see what we get. Not bad, not bad. It tastes just like regular iced tea, and I'm not gonna be like my cousin Jesse. I'm not here to see how drunk am I gonna get drinking my tea, and I keep drinking more tea so I get drunk. That, if I get enough feedback on wanting to do that, I might have a whole podcast where I sit and I have someone, maybe Robert, maybe somebody else, and we're testing the alcohol levels, and I'm working my way through shots or beers or something like that. But this isn't that today. It's not. Don't worry, Jesse. I'm not stealing your thunder. It's not bad. I'm not getting any kick. I'm not getting even any real taste of alcohol. Maybe I'm getting a taste more of lemon than anything else. So 5% ABV. The size of the can, which is kind of remind me of the tall boy that we talked about during the interview with James. The size of a tall boy, an old school one for those of you that used to drink that. A little bit of a kick to it. Not an alcohol kick, like I said. It's more of a lemon crispness at the end. It's certainly refreshing. And I can see myself drinking this because I have it in my fridge. I don't know if I would necessarily go and buy it. I'm not opposed to hard iced teas. I'm just not super into them. And of course, I'd much rather go with the higher ABVs that Scott and the team out of Brew Tea can name drop that I get out there. So don't worry, Scott. I'll be going back to you guys for the next one. And so thumbs up. I think I'm gonna give this. I'm gonna give it a 7 because it doesn't taste bad. It's not as high as I would like on the ABV. But it tastes just like a tea to me, and so any teas, in my opinion, won't go higher than a 7. So we're gonna do this a 7. All right, thanks. I'm gonna give it back to Podcast Hav. Hav, take it away. Hey everyone, Javier here again. Went to Boutique earlier today and picked up quite a few beers. So thanks Scott for being there. And yes, they are open. Picked up a couple, enough to go at least through next week with my reviews. Hopefully I can continue this while we are all at home. Anyway, I'm going with a Mi Casa Agave and Guava Sour Ale, 6.7 ABV, brought to us by the Martin House Brewing Company out of Fort Worth. And this is a really cool can, so I wanted to make sure you saw it. Really cool. So this is a sour ale, emphasis on the sour. If you're not a sour fan, you probably won't enjoy this. Here it is, beautiful color to it. And I'm gonna have some. Wow, that is really on the sour side. If you're a sour ale, this is one for you. If you aren't, you're probably not gonna like it. I think it's good. I'm gonna go with 6 thumbs up. There we go, 6 thumbs up, and Well, I'll bring it to you, another one to you tomorrow. Again, if you have opinion about this or a dissenting one, please post. And thanks for the people, the team out at Boutique. Bye. Hey, so sorry, Podcast Hop didn't get it right away. I threw in there an old review of a beer that I reviewed in March, Mikasa, and so I wanted to throw it in there because I wanted to continue the tradition of showing old reviews of beers that I've done in the past, because I want to continue to give a shout out to locally owned boutique and any other locally owned businesses that I might have in the future. I definitely want to keep throwing those out there, and talk about Dig Pub and all those other places. They are still being able to provide a service to us. So anybody that is in the Cedar Park, Austin area, I definitely recommend you go out and see them. Okay, so just finishing up now. I see I went a little long, like I did last week, but again, some fantastic interviews and some great talk here. I think next week I'm still looking for more interview ease. So if you have something passionate that you want to talk about, by all means let me know, and I will get you on the list. I still have one or two, maybe three people left that I will try to squeeze in an interview with them. So you never know where you're going to go on the first half. You've seen bubbles, you've seen music, you've seen writing, and you've seen exercise so far. So I think I think, and I'm hoping that I'm covering interests of people, not just for myself and for some of my friends and family, but interests for other people's as well. So please continue. I did get some valuable feedback last week, and I appreciate that. Please continue with the feedback. Please continue with your comments, thoughts, or suggestions in the body of the YouTube posting that I do. If you don't want to post on there because for whatever reason, you can direct message me on Facebook. Most of you have my name profile on Facebook, so you can reach out to me. Let me know what you think, and let me know if you want to talk about anything. I will literally, and friends and family will tell you this, I will literally talk about anything. Of course, my only two caveats to that is no politics and no religion. And those kind of speak for themselves as to why I will not have them on here. I'd like to keep this political and religious free. I have friends that are all over both spectrums, and I don't want to make this into a fiery debate or a he said, she said, or you're an MF and F you and all that kind of thing, because those two are very highly charged, emotionally charged for a lot of people. I want to keep this as fun as possible, and always it's going to be a beer section. So before you ask, yes, there will always be a beer section at the end. I can almost promise this to you, unless I get thousands of people saying, hey Javier, we love the first part, why don't you ease up on the beer? As I don't have thousands of followers yet, and I will continue to grow this, and I hope that I can start seeing people I don't know beginning to comment about this. Please share this with your other friends and family, family that I perhaps haven't reached out to or anything, extended family, anybody that you want. I make this public so you can share. I'd like to get more people and more feedback, of course, so that I can just do this from this point on. I think that would be great. I don't see it actually happening, but if it did, that would be super fantastic. Then I can have T-shirts and I can have merchandise for sale and that sort of thing. Because who doesn't want their own personally photo of Javier screenshotted onto a mug or a T-shirt or something like that, right? I think that would be fantastic. So once again, thanks to James and thanks to the people for writing me feedback. I will be here again next week. Don't know what next week's theme is, so it depends on who I interview. And we'll certainly go from there. I will have more fantastic beer reviews. And I'm going to go ahead and let y'all know to have a good week this week. Hope everybody's staying safe in these times. And I will talk to you again soon. All right, everybody. Thanks.